Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. You know that feeling, don't you? That little knot in your stomach when an English conversation is going pretty well, and then, boom, silence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've, said the things you practiced, you understood what they just said, but now it's your turn, and the mind just goes completely blank. What on earth do you say next? How do you keep it all flowing?
Oh, absolutely. It happens to, well, pretty much everyone at some point, especially, like you said, when you're navigating a language you're still getting comfortable with.
Yeah.
That silence can feel huge.
Yeah, huge, and really awkward. It's like a spotlight suddenly hits you.
Right. And the pressure to just say something is immense. It's a really common anxiety point for language learners, definitely.
Yeah.
But thing is, and this is what our sources really dig into, keeping that conversation moving smoothly. It isn't some kind of magic talent you're born with. It's actually a skill, and it's built on, well, surprisingly simple techniques and also understanding some of the cultural stuff behind it all.
Exactly. Simple techniques. That's what we love to find in our deep dives. And that's precisely what we're getting into today. We've gathered some really fascinating material that basically takes this whole problem apart. So our mission today is to pull out those core ideas, those practical tricks that can really help you handle those moments with a bit more confidence. We're going to look at asking questions that actually open doors, not slam them shut.
Yeah, the dead-end questions.
Yeah, those. And how to give answers that, give the other person something to grab onto. And those little words, those fillers that make people sound so natural.
Right, the smoothers.
And how to switch topics without it feeling, super awkward.
And crucially, I think, we'll get into that cultural side too, the unspoken rules maybe. Things like small talk, which is massive, and why telling a little story can work wonders. And how to actually show you're listening.
Active listening, yeah.
Because understanding that whole backdrop, that cultural landscape, it's honestly just as important as knowing the vocabulary words.
Okay, so settle in. By the end of this, you should feel like you've got a much better toolkit. Those silences, hopefully they'll start to feel less like a crap. Maybe more like a little pause, an opportunity.
All right.
You'll have ways to keep that conversational ball rolling and just feel, more comfortable, more confident when you're speaking English. So let's unpack this.
Let's do it. Okay.
So diving right in, based on what we see in the sources, where's the number one place people tend to trip up first when they're trying to keep a chat going?
Yeah, well, the sources really point to the very beginning of the interaction often. It's how people frame their questions. They tend to fall into this pattern of asking what the material calls dead-end questions.
Dead-end questions. I like that. It's very descriptive. It tells you exactly what happens, doesn't it? So what makes a question a dead end?
Well, it basically becomes a dead end when it's set up. So the easiest, most natural answer is just yes or no. Simple as that. Think about all those questions that start with, are you? Joke, did you? Is it? Can you? You know the type.
Right, yeah. Like, are you having a good time? Or did you watch the game last night?
Precisely. Now, if the other person just answers yes or no, which, let's be honest, is a perfectly reasonable and complete answer to that kind of question, then poof.
The conversation just stops.
It stops instantly. There's just nowhere obvious for it to go next. Unless, someone makes a real effort to launch a whole new topic or ask a totally different follow-up question. It puts all the work, all the burden on whoever speaks next to basically restart the whole conversation engine.
Which is exactly what creates that awkward pause we were talking about. Okay, so if yes-no questions are the problem, how do the sources say we should fix it? How do we turn those dead ends into, open roads?
So the main technique, the core advice, really, is to make a conscious shift. Move away from questions that just invite a simple yes or no. Instead, you want to ask questions that pretty much require a more detailed, descriptive answer. And the key to doing that is using those classic question words. What, how, or why.
Okay. Open-ended questions, we've probably all heard that term, but the sources really emphasize why this actually works in practice, right? It's not just some abstract grammar rule.
Exactly. It's not just about grammar. It's about what you're asking the other person's brain to do. You're prompting a different kind of response. The source material gives a really great, clear comparison. Imagine asking someone, do you like music?
Okay. Easy answer, yes or no.
Right. Probably yes. End of exchange, maybe a nod, but that's it.
Okay, versus the open-ended version.
Yeah, the open-ended version using what would be, what kind of music do you like? Now, see, they can't just say yes to that.
No, they can't.
They have to actually, think about it. access their preferences.
Yeah.
Give you some information. So they might say something like, oh, I'm really into indie rock, and I listen to quite a bit of jazz too. Or maybe, gosh, my taste is all over the place. Classical, hip-hop. But recently I've been listening to a lot of salsa.
And look at that. Instantly, you've got so much more to work with, haven't you? Instead of just one syllable, you've got genres, maybe even moods. If they say indie rock and jazz, well, you can ask about bands or specific albums or maybe where they listen to jazz. If it's salsa.
Exactly. You could ask, oh, cool, do you dance salsa? Or how did you get into salsa music? Or any particular artists you recommend? The answer itself basically plants the seeds for the next question.
Right.
These open questions, as the sources highlight, naturally encourage the other person to elaborate, to give details, opinions, examples. And those details are the gold. That's what you can react to, comment on, or ask more about.
So it changes the whole dynamic. It's not a closed loop anymore. It's more like a tree branching out. Each answer can lead to new potential branches for the conversation. And the source mentions another layer, too, using why.
Yes, that's a great follow-up. Once they've given you that initial descriptive answer, like what kind of music do you like? Oh, I love rock. My favorite band is Coldplay. Then you can dig a bit deeper with why.
So like, oh, interesting. Why do you like Coldplay so much?
Exactly. And now you're moving beyond just their preference to the reason behind it, their motivation, their feeling.
And that's often where the really interesting stuff comes out, isn't it? The personal connections, the stories, the feelings. Why questions can unlock much more engaging conversation.
Absolutely. They might start talking about, the lyrics resonating with them or the incredible energy of seeing them live, or maybe how a certain album got them through a tough time. Now you're having a much deeper, more connected exchange than just finding out if they like music or not.
Yeah, a world of difference.
So the key takeaway here, really emphasized in the sources, is to practice this. Consciously think in terms of what, how, and why when you're formulating your questions, especially maybe when you first meet someone or you're trying to get a conversation started. Instead of defaulting to, say, did you have a good weekend?
Which invites yes or no.
Right. What was the highlight of your weekend? Or how did you end up spending your weekend? It just demands more.
That makes perfect sense. You start with questions that require more than one word, and the whole thing has a much better chance of actually getting going. Okay, so asking good, open questions, that's one side of it. But what about when you're the one on the receiving end? When you're answering? Our sources point out that just giving really short replies is like another major conversation killer.
Oh, absolutely. It's the other half of the equation, isn't it? You could be talking to the world's best asker of open-ended questions, but if all your answers are just like one or two words,
it's still going to grind to a halt.
Exactly. It's definitely a two-way street. The flow depends on both people contributing.
So give us that classic example the source material uses to illustrate this.
Right. They use that simple question again, do you like traveling? Now, as we just discussed, that's technically a yes-no question, a bit of a dead end itself. But let's imagine even if the question was better, like, what do you enjoy about traveling? A really short answer would still be a problem. But focusing on the simple, do you like traveling? The absolute minimal conversation-stopping answer is just
yes.
yes.
Full stop.
And again, just like with asking the dead-end question, that single yes leaves the other person completely stranded, doesn't it? They've got nothing specific to respond to. They have to somehow invent a brand new question from scratch just to keep things alive.
Totally. There's zero information hook there. No little detail for them to grab onto, to ask about, to comment on. You've essentially just accepted their conversational serve, but haven't returned the ball in a way that's easy to play. The conversation stalls. And honestly, the other person might start to think, you're just not interested in talking.
Yeah, that's a good point. It can come across as disinterest. So what's the powerful advice from the source here? It sounds simple, but it seems really effective.
It is simple, but it's a game changer. The core idea is, when you answer a question, always try to add at least one extra little piece of relevant information. Or, even better sometimes, include a follow-up question yourself that bounces the conversational ball right back to them.
Okay, so don't just answer, add something. Or ask back. Exactly. This is how you become an active participant in maintaining the flow. Let's look at that traveling example again. Question: do you like traveling? Instead of just yes.
Right.
The source suggests something like this. Yes, I love traveling. Actually, last year I went to Thailand and it was amazing. Have you ever been there?
Okay, let's break that down because it really shows the technique perfectly. First part. Yes, I love traveling.
Straight answer.
Yeah.
Addresses the question directly. Clear.
Yep. But then Actually, last year I went to Thailand and it was amazing.
That's the extra bit, right?
That's the crucial added detail. And notice how specific it is, Thailand. Not just, I went somewhere nice, and it includes a reaction, it was amazing. This gives the other person something concrete to latch onto. Maybe they've also been to Thailand. Maybe they've always wanted to go. Maybe they'll ask why it was amazing or what part of Thailand you visited. So many possibilities spring from that one sentence.
And then the final part, which is brilliant. Have you ever been there? That's the follow-up question, the return shot. So you've done 3 things, answered their question, given them new information to react to, and then immediately offered them a clear, easy way to jump back in and keep the conversation going. You've politely handed the ball back.
So your answer isn't just the end of your speaking turn. It's deliberately setting up their next turn. It's like you're building a little bridge with every response you give.
That's a great way to put it, a conversational bridge. You're not just receiving, you're actively contributing to keeping the connection going. The source material really stresses that adding even just one small detail where you went, what you saw, how you felt about it, when it happened, gives the other person material. And tossing in that follow-up question, it directly invites them back in, removes that pressure of them having to think up something totally new on the spot.
This really reframes the whole idea of answering. It's not just about being accurate. It's about being generative, like generating the next step in the conversation.
Exactly. It's a fundamental shift in mindset. You have to think beyond just what's the literal answer to how can I make my answer a helpful stepping stone for the conversation? And this applies even to really simple questions like, the classic, how are you?
Oh, yeah, the standard fine, thanks, you.
Right. Which is okay, but a bit minimal. You could easily add just a tiny bit more detail about your day or how you're really feeling. Maybe something like, I'm doing pretty well, thanks. A bit tired today, though. I had a late night finishing up a project.
Ah, okay, so that gives them something. Oh, what project?
Exactly. Or maybe, I'm great, actually. Really enjoying this sunshine finally. Again, it provides a little texture, a potential follow-up. Yeah, the weather's gorgeous, isn't it? Or any plans to enjoy the sun? Just a small expansion makes a difference.
Okay, great. So technique 1, ask open questions. Technique 2, give answers with extra details and maybe a follow-up question. Got it. Now let's talk about something that makes people sound, well, just more natural and fluent. Those little, almost invisible words and phrases that pepper native speech. The sources talk about filler phrases.
Right. But it's important to clarify, we're not necessarily talking about the ums and that signal you're totally lost. Those happen too. We're talking more about the small words or short phrases that act like conversational lubricants. They smooth things out.
Linguistic lubricants? I like that too.
Yeah. They serve real functions. They can buy you a split second to think or soften a potentially blunt statement, show a bit of nuance or hesitation, or just make the whole exchange sound less, robotic, more human.
Makes sense. And the sources point out that native speakers very rarely just give those stark one-word answers like a flat yes or no or I don't know.
Almost never in casual conversation, yeah. They're usually softer, slightly padded ways to say these things.
Okay, so give us some examples from the source material. What do people often say instead of just a plain yes?
Well, yeah, probably the most common substitute. It's just more casual. To add a bit more enthusiasm or certainty, you get, yeah, definitely, or absolutely, or even just a simple, while nodding can function as a perfectly natural yes without being abrupt.
Okay. And what about no? That can sound quite negative or dismissive on its own sometimes.
Yeah, no often gets softened quite a bit. Not really is super common. It expresses a negative answer or maybe disagreement, but gently. And the sources give great examples where this softening is combined with that earlier point about adding detail or possibility.
Ah, like combining techniques.
Exactly. So instead of just no to, say, do you like horror movies? You might hear, not really, but I'd maybe watch one if it had a really good story. Or, not really, but I know my friend loves them. See? It's negative, but it keeps the door open a crack. It acknowledges the topic and offers a little something extra.
That's clever. It keeps the topic potentially alive, even if your personal answer is no. Okay, what about the classic, I don't know? Just saying that can feel like hitting a brick wall sometimes.
Right. It can feel a bit unhelpful. The forces suggest much more engaging ways to handle not knowing something. Instead of just a flat, I don't know, you can use phrases that show you've actually processed the question, and you're not just brushing it off.
Like what?
Well, something like, that's a good question. That's excellent. It does a few things. Buys you a second. validates their question, shows you're actually thinking about it, and you can easily pair it with why you don't know, like the source suggests. That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that before. Or maybe that's a really interesting point. I'm actually not sure what the official figures are on that.
Yeah, those sound so much more engaged and thoughtful than just to know. It keeps the connection going, even when you don't have the answer.
Precisely. It maintains that positive interaction and shows respect for the person asking. And beyond these specific yes, no, don't know alternatives, the sources also list some other really common general filler phrases you hear all the time in natural speech, like, well, actually.
Well, actually, okay, when would you use that? It sounds like you're about to correct someone, maybe.
Sometimes, yeah. Or maybe just offer a slightly different perspective or add a detail that clarifies things. It often signals that the reality is a bit more nuanced than the question assumes. Like if someone asks, did you finish the report? Instead of just no, you might say, well, actually, I finished the main draft, but I still need to add the appendix. It's more precise.
Gotcha. More informative than a simple no.
Yeah.
And the other big one mentioned is, you know.
The classic you know. You hear it everywhere.
Constantly. Sometimes it almost feels like it doesn't mean anything, but it must be doing something, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It serves a few subtle functions. Sometimes it's genuinely used to, like, check if the listener shares the same understanding or context.
Yeah.
And the traffic was just awful,
Yeah.
Other times it's more of a little placeholder, a way to keep the conversational floor while you gather your next thought. It's like a soft pause signal, inviting the listener to just hang on a second.
Okay.
Now, obviously, you don't want to overuse any filler to the point where it becomes really distracting. But sprinkling these common ones in naturally, it makes your speech sound significantly more fluid, less like you're reading from a script, and frankly, more like how native speakers actually talk.
Right. It's about embracing those little imperfections, those slight hesitations and adjustments that are just part of how we speak spontaneously. Fillers are part of the natural rhythm of conversation.
They really are. They give it texture.
Yeah.
Honestly, just consciously trying to incorporate one or two of these, maybe well, actually here or not really there, can make a noticeable difference in how comfortable and natural you sound.
Okay, this is great. So we've got open questions, detailed answers with follow-ups, and using these little filler phrases for smoothness. But sometimes, even if you're doing all that, a particular topic just kind of runs out of steam. Or you realize, okay, we need to talk about something else now? How do you change the subject smoothly without that awkward, like, screeching halt and restart? That's another key skill the sources cover.
Yeah, that's a really important one because just abruptly switching topics can feel quite jarring to the listener, can't it? And maybe a bit rude sometimes. It breaks the flow instead of gently redirecting it. So the sources offer some really useful transition phrases. Think of them as little bridges to get you from topic A to topic B smoothly.
Okay, conversational bridges again. I like that. Let's go through the main ones they suggest. The first one is, that reminds me.
Right. That reminds me.
Yeah.
Is perfect for when something that was just said, maybe even just a single word someone used, or a minor detail sparks an association in your mind with something else you want to bring up. Even if the connection is a bit loose, you state it. It makes the shift feel motivated, not random.
Okay. Can you give the example from the source?
Sure. Let's say the conversation was vaguely about, I don't know, planning trips, or maybe someone mentioned their daily commute. You can use that as a jumping off point. Oh, speaking of travel, that reminds me, have you ever considered visiting Japan?
Ah, I see. So the previous mention of travel or commuting is the anchor. And that reminds me, explicitly links your new topic, Japan, back to that anchor, even if Japan wasn't the main focus before. It gives a reason for the shift.
Exactly. It justifies why you're suddenly talking about Japan. It feels connected.
Oh.
Okay, another phrase they mentioned is speaking of that.
Speaking of that, how's that different from, that reminds me? It's similar.
It is similar, but speaking of that tends to be used when you want to stay more closely related to the current topic, but maybe shift the focus slightly or zoom in on a specific aspect that was just mentioned. The link is usually tighter, more direct.
Okay.
The source uses the example. If you were just talking about travel in general, maybe different countries you visited or types of holidays, you could use it to narrow the focus. Speaking of travel, what's your absolute dream destination? You're still on the travel theme, but you've steered it towards future dreams, a specific subtopic.
Got it. So that reminds me, is often for a slightly bigger jump, maybe based on a looser connection, While, speaking of that,
Yeah.
keeps you more within the same neighborhood, just looking at a different house, so to speak.
That's a good way to think about it. Yeah, it signals you're elaborating on or redirecting a closely related part of what you were just discussing.
Yeah.
Okay, the third main transition phrase the sources recommend is, oh, by the way.
This one feels like the most direct way to signal a change, maybe to something completely unrelated.
It often is, yeah. Oh, by the way, is your go-to when the new topic you want to introduce doesn't really have a clear logical link to what came before. Maybe you just remembered something important you wanted to ask or mention.
Right.
It signals a definite shift, but crucially, it does it casually. It softens the change, makes it feel less abrupt than just blurting out the new topic. The source example is simple. Oh, by the way, did you catch the news this morning? Unless you were already talking about current events, this clearly pivots the conversation.
It's like saying just remembered or on a completely different note, but much smoother and more common in conversation. It prepares the listener for that pivot.
Absolutely. And these phrases, that reminds me, speaking of that, oh, by the way, they are incredibly useful tools in your conversational kit. They really help prevent those awkward silences where you're racking your brain thinking, how can I bring up this other thing? They give you ready-made ways to steer the conversation gently, making you feel more in control and making it easier for the listener to follow along. Using them well just makes the whole interaction feel more effortless, more sophisticated.
Okay, this is fantastic. We've covered the mechanics. Asking open questions, giving building answers, using fillers, transitioning smoothly. That feels like a really solid technical toolkit. But the sources make a really critical point beyond just the words themselves. Conversation isn't just this technical exchange, it's deeply, deeply tied to culture.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial.
To really keep conversations flowing naturally in English, you need to grasp some of the cultural expectations that underpin it all.
Totally agree. What's considered polite or engaging or even just, normal in a conversation can vary so much from one culture to another. You could be applying all the techniques we just talked about perfectly, but if you're missing the cultural context, it might still feel a little off or maybe not land quite right.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest cultural elements the sources zoom in on for English-speaking context is small talk.
Ah, yes, small talk. The thing some people love and some people dread. Our sources call it a huge part of daily interactions.
And it really is. It's fundamental, particularly in places like the U.S., the U.K., Canada, Australia.
Yeah.
Many English-speaking environments. Small talk isn't really about exchanging deep information. It serves a vital social function. It's like a social lubricant.
Okay.
It helps people feel comfortable with each other. It builds a little bit of rapport. It fills those potentially awkward gaps. And sometimes it acts as a kind of warm-up before getting into more serious topics. Or sometimes it's just about having a brief, pleasant interaction.
So it's that chat you have waiting for the elevator or before a meeting kicks off or when you bump into someone at the coffee machine.
Exactly that. It happens absolutely everywhere. At work, waiting in line at a store, social events, school pickup, networking things. Anywhere people gather informally or semi-formally. It's those short, usually light, non-threatening exchanges that just acknowledge the other person and keep the social wheels turning.
Okay, but critically, you can't just talk about anything during small talk, can you? What are the safe topics, according to the sources?
Right, this is key. Small talk relies on neutral, generally accessible topics that most people can have a simple opinion on or share a brief experience about without getting too personal or causing friction. The absolute classic safe zones mentioned are the weather.
Always the weather.
Always. TV shows or movies, weekend plans, past or future, and sports. These are seen as pretty universal and low risk. Most people can say something about them.
So those standard phrases like, wow, it's been so hot lately, hasn't it? Or, did you happen to catch that new series everyone's talking about? Or, got any fun plans for the weekend coming up?
Precisely. Those are textbook small talk openers. And the expected replies are usually light and brief, too. Any fun plans for the weekend? You might get, oh, probably just relax, maybe see a movie. Or, actually, yeah, going to a friend's barbecue. Easy to answer. And they offer simple little hooks for a brief follow-up if the situation allows. Just relaxing, sounds nice, needed that. Or, oh, barbecue, sounds fun, hope the weather holds out.
And this is really important. The sources give a very clear warning about what topics are generally off limits for small talk, especially with people you don't know well.
Yes, this is vital cultural awareness.
Yeah.
In many English-speaking contexts, certain topics are considered too private, too sensitive, or potentially too divisive for casual chit-chat. Bringing them up can make people very uncomfortable very quickly.
Yeah.
The sources specifically flag money.
Right, like asking someone their salary. Big no-no.
Huge no-no. Also religion and politics.
Yeah, those are the big three, often cited as potential conversational minefields in casual settings.
Absolutely. Unless you know someone very well and they choose to bring these topics up, steering clear is the safest bet. These subjects can easily lead to awkwardness, offense, or strong disagreement, which totally undermines the whole point of small talk, building that easy, comfortable connection. The advice is crystal clear. Stick to general shared experiences or observations. Keep it light, keep it friendly, find that safe common ground.
Okay, so small talk is crucial for those shorter, lighter interactions, establishing comfort. What about keeping longer conversations genuinely engaging? The sources bring up storytelling as another really powerful cultural element.
Yes, storytelling is highly valued. In many Western cultures, people really enjoy hearing personal stories, anecdotes, little narratives about experiences. It's seen as a great way to, well, entertain, yes, but also to share a bit of yourself, to connect on a more human level, and to make your points more vivid and memorable.
So it's about taking a simple answer and expanding it into a little story, a mini narrative.
Exactly that. It transforms a potentially flat response into something much more engaging. The sources use that "how was your weekend?" question again is a great illustration. We know the minimal answer, "it was good," is basically a conversation stopper.
Right, nothing to grab onto.
But the storytelling version, it brings it to life. Instead of just "it was good," you could offer a brief narrative, something like, "Oh, it was actually really interesting. On Saturday, my partner and I went hiking, and we stumbled across this incredible hidden waterfall. Seriously, it wasn't on any map. Felt like a proper adventure."
Wow, okay. That's already much better.
And then you continue. "Sunday was supposed to be relaxing. I tried making homemade bread for the first time. Total disaster.
Yep.
Ended up setting off the smoke alarm. Ha.
Okay, that's brilliant. It's vivid, it's personal, it has highs and lows, and it immediately gives the listener multiple things they could react to.
It really does. By sharing those two little contrasting vignettes, the exciting discovery, the funny mishap, you've served up options. As the sources point out, the listener might latch on to the hiking. "Wow, a hidden waterfall. That sounds amazing. Whereabouts were you hiking?" Or they might relate to the kitchen chaos. "Oh no, a bread disaster. Ha, been there. What recipe were you using?"
And either of those responses leads naturally into more conversation, maybe them sharing a similar hiking or cooking story. It creates a real back and forth, much more engaging than just stating facts.
It makes the whole interaction feel more personal, more lively, more fun, frankly. You're not just swapping data points. You're sharing slices of life, experiences, emotions. Telling even a short, simple story, just a few sentences, makes your contributions far more interesting and provides that concrete material for the other person to connect with, keeping the conversation flowing much more naturally.
Okay, so we have small talk for the light stuff, storytelling for deeper engagement. What's the final piece of this cultural puzzle that the sources highlight? It's about what you do when the other person is speaking. It's called active listening.
Yes, and this is so important. In many English-speaking cultures, listening is definitely not a passive sport. You are generally expected to actively show that you are listening and that you're engaged. And you do this through both verbal sounds and nonverbal signals.
Okay. And this might be different from other cultures.
It can be, yes. The sources contrast this with some cultures where maybe showing deep respect and attention is done through quiet stillness, perhaps avoiding too much eye contact. In many English-speaking contexts, however, that quietness can sometimes be misinterpreted.
Misinterpreted how? Like you're bored or you don't understand.
Exactly. Without those little signals of engagement, the speaker might start to wonder, are they following me? Are they interested? Do they disagree but they're not saying anything? Active listening provides that crucial real-time feedback. It reassures the speaker, encourages them to continue, and confirms that you're, well, present in the conversation.
Okay, so what are the specific verbal cues the sources mentioned? Those little noises or short words you make while someone else is talking.
Right, these are the little affirmative sounds and brief interjections. Things like, uh-huh, There's like verbal nods. Also, yeah, right, okay, I see. Those confirm understanding. And then you have slightly more expressive reactions, showing you're processing the emotional content too. "Oh, really? No way." Often used for surprise or something impressive, not necessarily negative. "Wow, that sounds amazing. Huh, gosh, that's interesting." Or, "I see what you mean."
No way is such a common one, isn't it? When someone tells you something surprising, using that feels so much more connected than just silence.
It really does. These little interjections, they're like tiny conversational handshakes happening throughout the other person's turn.
Yeah.
They show you're tracking, you're reacting, you're with them. They often fill the briefest of pauses, and they really do encourage the speaker because they feel heard. They feel like their points are landing effectively.
And it's not just the sounds and words, is it? The sources mentioned body language is a big part of this, too.
A huge part, yes. The sources point to key nonverbal signals that broadcast active listening in this cultural context. The big ones are maintaining fairly consistent eye contact, not staring intently, but regularly meeting their gaze, nodding your head occasionally, showing agreement, or just that you're following, and sometimes slightly leaning in towards the speaker can signal increased interest and engagement.
Okay, so really practicing active listening means consciously combining these verbal sounds and phrases with the right body language. The sources actually suggest practicing this, like making it a deliberate habit to use short reactions like, oh, wow, or that's interesting.
Exactly. Make it a conscious habit, especially if it doesn't feel natural at first. These micro-responses demonstrate that you're engaged, and they make the whole interaction feel much more dynamic, more collaborative. And there's a feedback loop here, too. When you show you're actively listening, the other person usually feels more comfortable, maybe shares more details or longer stories.
Which in turn gives you more material to respond to, using the techniques we talked about earlier.
Precisely. It all connects. Active listening fuels the whole conversational engine. It's a really fundamental part of the rhythm and feel of spoken English.
Wow, okay. This has been incredibly practical. We've gone from the sentence level, questions, answers, fillers, all the way up to the cultural landscape with small talk, storytelling, listening cues. That's a lot of ground covered. Now, the crucial bit, actually doing something with all this information. Our sources wrap things up with some clear, actionable steps for you, the listener, to try out, maybe even today.
Yeah, and the key is not to feel overwhelmed.
Right.
They break down into a really simple, manageable challenge. Don't feel like you have to suddenly become a master of all these things overnight.
Right. So, step one, they suggest, choose a conversation topic. Pick something relatively simple and common that you actually enjoy talking about. The sources mention things like music or travel or maybe one of your hobbies.
Step 2. The next time you have a chance to talk about that topic, consciously focus on practicing just one technique related to asking questions. Remind yourself about what, how, or why. So instead of defaulting to, do you like hobby? Actively try to formulate it as, what do you enjoy most about hobby? Or, how did you first get into hobby?
Okay, just focus on the questions. And then step 3, in another conversation, or maybe the same one if you're feeling ambitious, try focusing on using just one of the other techniques. Maybe concentrate on adding that one extra detail to every answer you give. Or pick one specific filler phrase like, not really, instead of no. Or, that's a good question, instead of, I don't know. And try to use it just once when the opportunity naturally comes up.
Exactly. The emphasis is on conscious, focused practice, but starting really small. Pick one thing, try it out, see how it feels. It could be in a structured setting like with a language tutor or just a casual chat with a colleague or neighbor. Low stakes are good for practice.
And crucially, as you try these things, remember that really powerful closing thought that came up in the source material? English is about connection, not perfection.
This is so important to internalize. Honestly, don't let the fear of making a grammatical mistake or saying something slightly awkwardly paralyze you. That's not the point.
Right.
The real goal of having a conversation is to connect with another person, to share ideas or feelings or experiences. Small errors in language are completely secondary to actually making that human connection happen.
So focus on understanding them and helping them understand you. Use all these techniques we've talked about as tools to help you build that connection more easily and keep it going strong. The more you practice using them, the more automatic and natural they'll become over time. So just keep talking, keep putting yourself out there, keep practicing, and try to remember to have some fun with it along the way.
Absolutely. Experiment a little. See which phrases feel comfortable for you. Try different ways of adding detail. And definitely celebrate those little wins when you notice you kept a conversation going a bit longer, or navigated a topic change more smoothly than before. That's progress.
Definitely. And as you think about everything we've unpacked in this deep dive, here's a final thought to maybe chew on afterwards. We spent a lot of time looking at the specific cultural aspects of English conversation, small talk rules, storytelling, active listening signals. Now, turn the lens around for a moment. Thinking about how your own first language or your own cultural background shapes your natural conversation style can be just as enlightening as learning the English conventions. How does your culture typically handle conversational pauses, for example? How do people signal they're listening attentively? What topics are considered perfectly fine for light chat where you come from? Reflecting on that, what specific aspect of the English style we discussed today feels the most different or perhaps the most challenging compared to what you're used to? And based on that reflection, which specific technique or cultural insight from our deep dive do you think you'll consciously try to put into practice first in your very next English conversation? Food for thought. Keep those reflections going and definitely keep those conversations flowing.
Until the next deep dive.